I'm Denise, and I'm a compulsive eater, and I weigh and measure only 3 meals per day, only from foods listed on the gray sheet without exception, and I commit them to my sponsor in person, verbally, by phone, and I eat those meals no matter what, and don't eat between meals no matter what. My anniversary date is 27 February 2001. I was 12-stepped into Gray Sheet on August 1st, 1997. Along at the same time into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Prior to that period, I had been in the rooms of OA and OA How from 1984 until that time. So every 6 months I relapsed, almost to the date. And the problem was I didn't know what the allergy was. All I knew was, and I didn't know when enough was enough. When you told me I could eyeball my food, that just went crazy. Growing up, I was not a fat kid. Although the disease started early. I remembered people laughing at me being a large baby, so I never thought I was small enough, so that kind of planted the anorexia in there. I just didn't know when enough was enough, and I would hide food. I'd go nuts with the sweets. My mother was not a baker. She had very simple meals. We had no alcoholism in my immediate family. And my aunt, my father's sister, had a problem with food when she was young. So that's the only similarity. In high school, I had a weight gain, and the Air Force diet and the Cambridge diet came out at that time. I also thought about maybe going into the convent because nuns were thin. The movie The Nun Story was out at that time. So I figured, well, if I go in the convent, then I'll definitely be thin. And thank God, my mother suggested, she said, why don't you go to nursing school? You like being a nurse's aide. And then when you get out of nursing school, you'll have something to offer to the missionary nuns. They won't have to pay for your education. I said, that sounds like a good idea. Nursing school, I put on 35 pounds my first 2 months because the food was free. We got free meals. They brought snacks up to our residence on each floor, all carbohydrates. And I could barely fit into my uniform. So for 3 years in nursing school, it was like trying to get out of this weight. At that time in 1965, the recruiters for the military came around, and they said, well, we'll give you a stipend your last year of school, and you only owe us 2 years of active duty. And I figured, well, that's good. I could travel, and I could even lose weight in the military because the food's not that good. Well, I loved military food. At that time, the Vietnam War was going on. Our class, he said, almost all of you are going to be over there. And I figured, that's great. I said, food's not good over in Vietnam. I love the food we had over there. I loved K rations when we used them. I got friendly with the guys in the mess hall. And I remember when we wore fatigues, and one of my corpsmen made a comment about my weight, and that just sent the rage going. And I just said, and so that started me to try undereating again, because I didn't know what else to do. And when I came home from Vietnam, my high school buddy said, there's a program, and this was 1971. She said, there's a program called Weight Watchers. She said, I tried OA, but she said I wasn't crazy about it. But so we went to Weight Watchers. Well, I joined Weight Watchers 13 times and stopped joining it. I figured 13 is not a lucky number, because every time I got to my goal weight, I figured I could pick up the food again and I'd be fine. And so, I just kept relapsing until a friend said, until when I was seeing a psychiatrist in Los Angeles, and he said, when I first went in to meet him, and I was seeing him for panic attacks on the freeways in LA. And he said, you could stand to lose about 25 pounds. Well, that started the anorexia. A guy saying that to me. And so I started undereating on the Weight Watchers food plan, and then going to the gym for 2 hours. And I was working full time also and smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And I thought I was totally healthy. And this shrink that I was seeing 3 times a week, he said, how much weight have you lost this month? I said, I've lost 15 pounds. I'm doing great. I'm eating healthy. I'm going to the gym. And you could smell cigarette smoke on me. And so he said, you have a disease that I can't cure. And I didn't want to hear that. I said, I'm paying you this amount of money 3 times a week, and you're telling me I have a disease you can't cure. And so rather than him harping on me every week, did you go to a meeting? Did you go to OA? I finally just went. And I was on the anorexic end of the disease at that time, and I wanted nothing of what they had. The only thing I gravitated towards were the thin bulimics and anorexics at the OA meetings. And I got a sponsor. I stayed there for about a year, and she went over to Howe, and I went over to Howe with her. And we got the eating plan, no carbs, first 30 days. But then they said you could have healthy carbs. And that set up the phenomenon of craving again. And so, relapsing every 6 months in Howe, OA and OA Howe. And in 1996, I was in a terrible relapse with the food, and I was on a business trip. And I was a nurse anesthetist at that time. And I was in San Antonio, Texas on the Riverwalk, and I was waiting for my dinner. And I asked the gal, I said, what are those people drinking over there? And she said, those are margaritas, and we serve them in beer steins. I said, I'll have one right now. And I chug-a-lugged that thing down, and I went, I have finally reached what I need to have. And I got ready to order another one immediately and cancel out the dinner. And all of a sudden, that little voice in my head said, you just crossed the line, sweetheart. You're also an alcoholic. And it scared me to death. And when I came back to Los Angeles, I told my friend, and she just said, meet me at the Little Brown Church on Saturday. And she said, we're going to go to an AA meeting. We're going to go to a Gray Sheet meeting in North Hollywood. And I saw a bunch of people at that Gray Sheet meeting that were in normal sized bodies. They were happy. They enjoyed their food. And I went, well, I'll try it. And 2 weeks into that, I allowed somebody to have a taste of my lunch. And I mentioned it to my sponsor, expecting him to say, oh, you're so generous. You were so kind, everything. And he said, you're back to day one. And I said, what do you mean? I said, I allowed them to have a tiny little piece of a soy thing. I said, it didn't weigh anything. And he said, you didn't keep the commitment to me to eat all of your lunch. He said, you didn't eat it all. And he said, you're back to day one. And I figured I'd stay with him because I had gotten on the scale after 2 weeks and I'd lost 2 pounds. And it started working. And the people in the Los Angeles community, they showed me how to shop. They showed me how to prepare my meals. They showed me how to enjoy my food. They showed me about backup. And, the weight just came off. And in 6 months, I was at a normal size. And is that 5 minutes already or 10? No? Okay. And so I was going to my AA meetings, and one of the guys started dating me at my AA meetings. I hadn't dated in 17 years because I was into the food craziness. And my Gray Sheet sponsor said, I don't think that's a good idea right now, Denise. She said, work on your program. And what she was talking about was the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, because those steps are mentioned twice on our Gray Sheet, on the front and on the back. And so I fired her, even though she had 25 years of abstinence and sobriety. She got sober and abstinent on the same time. I got another Gray Sheet sponsor who didn't ask me about dating. She just wanted my food. And we were dating a little bit, but I had us married, living in a house with 3 kids at 50 years of age, of course, and a white picket fence. That's how crazy my head was. And it was my friend in AA, and she had 26 years of sobriety, and she was dying from breast cancer. And she said, Denise, you better get honest with Tom. She said, he's not interested in you the way you think he is. And she said, you're going to drink if you don't get honest with him. And I said, oh, Barbara. And she said, you're going to drink. And I said, I'll tell him, I'll get honest. And when I did, he said, I'm really not that interested, Denise. He said, I just like having coffee. I said, oh, that's fine. Well, I didn't know how to deal with the rejection because I hadn't done the steps. And I continued to weigh and measure my food. But every time at my AA meeting, if I saw him paying attention to a younger girl, it made me nuts. And finally, after I celebrated a year of Gray Sheet abstinence, it was 1 month after my abstinence, I was so pissed off. I was coming off from work feeling sorry for myself. And back then, we carried rolls of quarters, dimes, and nickels with us and phone numbers. And I went into a 7-Eleven. And that's when they sold those 25-cent frozen carbs. And that little voice went off in my head when the guy behind the counter said, can you wait 5 minutes? I have to check somebody out. The cashier is on her break. And that voice in my head said, you have time to make a call. Call somebody right now. Right now, make that phone call, Denise. And I just said, I'll get right back on tomorrow. I want what I want when I want it. Guy came back. The minute I took that
5 minutes, Denise.
Thank you. The minute I took that lick, I knew I was in big trouble. And that voice went off again in my head and it said, you don't know when you're going to get your day one again. And that's why I tell people, don't be secure when you say, I only went out on gray sheet food. It's not abstinent if it's not weighed and measured and committed to your sponsor. And so I showed up at the gray sheet meeting in Los Angeles on Saturday morning, told my sponsor, I was in so much shame because I had put on like 65 pounds in almost 2 months. I mean, I just couldn't stop eating. And as a result of that, I quit my job. I moved 3,300 miles to the East Coast. I got a job that I made 25% less in salary than I did in Los Angeles with no benefits. And I had sold my house in LA that was almost totally paid off. And here I was in an outpost. And the only thing that kept me partially sane was AA meetings. There were no gray sheet meetings. There were 2 phone bridge meetings at that time in 99. And so I went to those. And there was a gray sheeter who said, keep calling me. I said, but I'm not absent. She said, just call me. Just make the outreach call to me. And that's what I did for 2.5 years. I went to those 2 meetings. I kept calling this gal, went to my AA meetings. And then I got a sponsor out of Cambridge and I started weighing and measuring with her. And after about 2 weeks, I was on 24-hour call for the OR and I was bored. You know, I hadn't lost my 65 pounds in 2 weeks. And I decided I was going to graze. I grazed with 25 cents here, 25 cents there, take a bite, spit it out. I'm controlling it. The minute I got home, whether it was food poisoning or what, I started to throw up like I have never thrown up before. And it was not me sticking my hand down my throat. It just kept coming. And then I got the shakes. I was cold. And I called my boss up and I said, I have a stomach virus. I said, I can't finish my call. She said, don't worry about it. So the disease was creeping into my job. And it was creeping in there beforehand where I would, bring cookies into the OR and put them in the little side cart. And then one day my friend said, who is eating cookies in the goddamn OR? And I went, oh, it must be somebody, one of the newer anesthetists. So I was blaming stuff. I was lying. And so, when I called my gray sheet sponsor up the next morning and I said, I can't give you my food because my stomach's like glass. I said, I picked up, blah. She said, give me your food in that tone. And when I hear people say my loving and gentle sponsor, she was not loving and gentle. And she said, are you willing to eat what I tell you to eat? And I said, yes. She told me exactly what to eat. I ate it and I called her up the next day. And that started my abstinence. And I realized that I couldn't do this abstinence the way I did it the first time around, because the first time around didn't keep me abstinent. I had to do other things, which meant I had to make outreach calls to people because my sponsor said, I'm not available to you 24/7. I sponsor other people. I have my own program to do, and I work full time as a teacher. So you better get some connections and keep them in a phone book, carry them with you, what time zone people are in. And that's what I had to do. And I kept doing that. And I figured, things started to settle down. The weight started to come off, but it was coming off much slower because I was 2 years older. I'd gone through menopause. And I remember standing in one of the department stores and I said, dear God, if I never get any smaller than this, please give me the gift of acceptance and let me to continue to weigh and measure my food. And I continued to weigh and measure. And the first, no matter what, came up with severe vertigo. And I was dizzy and nauseous for 6 weeks. And my sponsor told me exactly what to eat. And it was the same food every day because I didn't throw up from it. But I was nauseous, but I didn't throw up. And that eventually kind of petered out. And then, there was a gray sheeter in the Austin retreat years ago who said, gray sheet didn't say that, life wouldn't happen, Denise, or that I wouldn't have to take medication when I, reached 65. And so no matter what started coming up, emergency surgery on a Friday night, And I got on the phone with a GreySheeter. My sponsor wasn't available. And it was this old timer in Cambridge. And I said, I'm in the emergency room. I'm getting ready to go to the OR. I can't eat my dinner because the surgeon and the anesthesiologist don't want me to eat because they'll say I'll throw up and get pneumonia. And she said, okay, you just turned over your meal. Call me in the morning when you wake up. And I went, okay. When I woke up from the anesthesia in the morning,
Time, Denise.
10? Was that 10 minutes?
No, time.
Total time?
Yeah.
15, okay. But I've learned I've had to do this program differently, have to make those 3 outreach calls a day. Some days I get 10 live voices that pick up the phone. But it's a minimum of 3 outreach calls a day, because when the time comes when something's going to come up, I have to keep dialing that phone until I get a live voice to say, Denise, we weigh and measure our food and we don't eat no matter what, and then use the steps to see what's going on with the bedevilments that have creeped up that day. Thanks.